The old pickup truck came to a stop in the middle of waist-high grass. The engine hummed softly, but Jack Callahan didn't reach for the key. He sat still behind the wheel, hands gripping it tight, eyes locked on the overgrown field, the leaning fence, and the sagging rooftop in the distance. Beside him, Rosie, his 8-year-old daughter, had dozed off, her head resting on a worn backpack. A strand of hair slipped from her red butterfly clip, fluttering gently in the breeze drifting through the open window. Jack inhaled deeply. His wallet held just over $800 this morning, and it was all gone now, traded at the county office for ownership of a patch of forgotten land. This is all that's left, he whispered to himself. Rosie stirred, blinking sleepily as she looked outside. Her voice, soft and clear, broke the silence. "Daddy, is this really ours now?" Jack forced a smile, reaching over to ruffle her messy hair. "Yeah, sweetheart, it's ours. What do you think?" Rosie rubbed her eyes, staring at the crooked house, the broken fences, the wild grass taking over everything. "It's big, but it looks kinda sad." Jack swallowed hard. Her words stung, because they were true. But somewhere in her gaze, Rosie already saw something he couldn't yet. Jack turned off the engine. The hum faded, giving way to the soft rustle of wind and the dry crunch of grass under the tires. He stepped out, his worn boots pressing into the hard-packed dirt, eyes fixed on the house ahead. 2 stories, peeling paint, sagging roofline, broken fences. Rosie followed, hopping down beside him. Her small hand found his without a word. They stood together, staring at the unfamiliar house, not a place that had ever been home, but maybe it could become one. The old place, the tiny apartment back in the city, lived only in memory now. Jack could still see Rachel sitting by the window, rocking Rosie to sleep with quiet lullabies. The flickering kitchen light, the soft laughter over simple dinners. It was all gone now, along with the woman he thought he'd grow old with. Life had fallen apart after that. The job disappeared, debts piled up, the apartment was sold. His dream of a quiet, ordinary life had shattered. And now here he was, on unfamiliar soil, with the last of his money traded for the last of his hope. Jack crouched beside Rosie, his voice low but sure. "This place, it's going to take a lot of work, but I believe we can fix it. You and me." Rosie nodded, her face serious in that grown-up way only children can manage. "Can we plant flowers so bees will come?" Jack chuckled, his first real smile all day. "Flowers sound perfect." The afternoon sun poured golden light across the wild grass. Jack started making a mental list. Rebuild the fence, clean out the barn, check the roof. All of it felt too much, but at least it was something to begin again with. Near the edge of the property, where the fence met the tree line, a figure appeared. A woman, early 30s, flannel shirt, dark hair tied back. She stood still, eyes fixed on the house, like it once meant something to her. Rosie squeezed his hand. "Daddy, who's that?" Jack narrowed his eyes. "Don't know. Stay close." The woman noticed them, gave a polite nod and turned away, disappearing down a dirt path leading to a small house next door. He pushed open the front door. It groaned under his hand. Inside, the air was thick with dust, wallpaper peeling, the floorboards creaked beneath each step. Rosie wandered from room to room, not afraid, just curious. In the kitchen, she paused. "Daddy, do you think Mom would have liked this place?" The question caught Jack in the chest. He reached out, brushed her hair back gently. She would have loved it. They stood there in the fading light, sunlight spilling through a cracked window. Jack didn't have a plan or savings or guarantees. But here, with his daughter's hand in his, in this broken house, he knew one thing. He wasn't going to give up. The next morning, Jack was up early. He stood on the sagging front porch, a steaming mug of black coffee in hand, his gaze sweeping across the dew-drenched field. The air smelled of damp earth and old hay. In the light of day, the barn looked even worse, the roof sagging, one of the doors hanging on a rusted hinge. The house, well, that could wait. From inside, the soft patter of Rosie's feet crossed the creaking floorboards. She hummed a half-remembered tune, her voice small but warm. Jack exhaled. He didn't have a blueprint for the future, just this dry land, his two hands, and Rosie. He made his way toward the back of the property, where the boundary fence marked the edge of their lot. The wind rustled through tall grass. Then he saw her, the woman from yesterday, standing near the fence, her back to him, morning sun brushing her loosely tied dark hair. Her posture was relaxed, not tense, but there was a stillness about her, like she was listening for something long gone. Jack wiped his hands on his jeans, protective instinct stirring. Out here, people respected space. Strangers didn't linger. "Morning," he called out, his voice steady. She turned, shielding her eyes from the sun, and gave a polite nod. As he drew closer, he noticed things he hadn't the day before. Features sharp but calm, hair pulled back. But it was her eyes that stopped him. Something restless behind them, like a storm not yet broken. "Haven't seen you around town," Jack said, stopping a few feet from the fence. "New to Oak Ridge?" "Sort of," she replied, offering a faint smile. "Just moved into the old Carter place down the road." Jack nodded. "Thought that house was sitting empty." "It was. Figured it could use some company." Her voice was light, but her gaze weighed heavier than her words. "I'm Jack Callahan," he said, extending a hand over the fence. "This is my place, or what's left of it." She stepped forward and shook it. Firm grip, calloused palm. He hadn't expected that. "Emilia Blake," she said. "Nice to meet you, Jack." Her name rode the wind. Short, simple, unclaimed. "What brings you out here?" he asked, gesturing toward the open field. "Honestly, looking for a bit of quiet. Maybe learn how to work with my hands." Jack gave a soft chuckle. "You picked one hell of a fixer-upper town." "That's what I'm counting on." Her lips twitched. The silence that followed wasn't awkward, just full of unsaid things. "Daddy, breakfast!" Rosie's voice rang out from the porch. Jack turned slightly. "Be right there, bug." And when he looked back, Emilia's face had softened at the sound of the girl's voice. "Your daughter?" she asked. "Yeah, Rosie. 8 years old and already runs circles around me." Emilia smiled faintly. "She's lucky." Jack hesitated, unsure how to respond to the weight behind her words. He scratched the back of his neck. "If you're looking to get your hands dirty, there's no shortage of work here." Emilia's eyes glinted with something he couldn't quite read. "I'll keep that in mind." She turned and walked back down the path toward the Carter house, disappearing behind the trees. Jack stood there a moment longer, the wind tugging at his coat, something about her still lingering in the air. Inside the house, time felt like it had stopped years ago. Every step Jack took on the wooden floorboards made them creak, as if complaining about being woken from a long sleep. The walls were covered in old faded wallpaper, peeling at the corners. Sunlight filtered through cracked windows, catching the dust that floated silently in the still air. The space smelled of old wood and memory. Rosie moved slowly, her wide eyes taking in each room like it was some forgotten castle from a fairy tale. Worn down, but still full of mystery. "Daddy," her voice called from down the hall. "This room has a fireplace like in my storybook." Jack walked over, joining her in the dusty living room. The old brick fireplace stood there, cracked and silent, once the heart of the home, where he and his mother used to huddle close on long winter nights. He didn't say anything, just nodded, letting the memory wash over him. Rosie looked around, then asked a question that stopped his heart for a beat. "Do you think Mom would have liked this place?" Jack took a quiet breath. "Rachel, Her name drifted through his mind like a soft breeze, not as painful as it once was, but still tender. He knelt down and gently brushed Rosie's hair behind her ear. I think she would have, he said softly. They stood there in silence. Sunlight streamed through the broken window, catching floating dust in golden rays, like little sparks of something yet to come. Jack had no clear plan, no idea what tomorrow would bring. But in that moment, in this broken-down house, with Rosie's small hand wrapped around his, he knew one thing for sure. Giving up wasn't an option. That afternoon, Jack stood by the old fence, sweat beading on his brow. In his hand was a rusted hammer, eyes focused on the leaning posts swaying with the wind. The to-do list grew longer by the hour, but he didn't let himself stop. Behind him, Rosie's laughter rang out, light and free. She was chasing a butterfly across the uneven yard, her off-centered ponytail bouncing as she ran. That sound, so small, was the very thing that kept Jack from falling apart. Need an extra pair of hands? A voice called out from behind. Jack turned. Emilia stood a few feet away, sleeves rolled up, her hair pulled back into a loose braid. On her sun-kissed face was a quiet smile, not shy but resolute. He raised an eyebrow. Thought you were still settling into the Carter place. I am, she said with a shrug, but I figured maybe I was needed more here. Jack hesitated. He wasn't used to help, and certainly not to letting strangers in. But there was something different about Emilia, a steadiness that wasn't put on, a grit that didn't flinch. Ever fixed a fence before? He asked, half teasing. Nope, but I'm a quick learner. Her eyes sparked with humor. He paused, then nodded. I won't say no to free labor. From across the yard, Rosie came running, eyes wide with delight. You're back, she exclaimed. Emilia crouched to her level, smiling warmly. I am. What's your name again? Rosie, the girl beamed. Then she turned to her father. Daddy, can she stay and play? Jack chuckled softly, handing Emilia a pair of old work gloves. She slipped them on without hesitation, and together they began pulling up old posts and hammering in replacements. There wasn't much conversation, just two people working side by side, the rhythm of labor filling the space between them. The scent of wood, sweat, and sun drifted on the breeze. Rosie perched on a stump nearby, softly singing as she braided blades of grass. A little while later, she ran over, holding out her creation. Miss Emilia, this is for you. Emilia accepted the grass crown with both hands, like it was something sacred. Thank you, Rosie. It's beautiful. Jack watched them quietly, something tightening in his chest. His daughter, so quick to love, to trust. And him? He'd built his life on being careful, being guarded. Emilia looked up, meeting his eyes, just for a moment, but it was enough for Jack to feel something shift. Something was beginning. The sky had darkened. Jack stood at the base of the attic stairs, staring up at the old pull-down ladder, as if it led to some part of himself he wasn't ready to revisit. Let's go up there, Daddy. What if there's treasure? Rosie chimed, eyes sparkling. Jack chuckled. Let me check the floor first. You wait here, Bug. He pulled down the ladder. It creaked loudly in protest. As he climbed, each step felt like a trip backward in time, into afternoons spent sneaking up here, into whispers between dust and secrets. His flashlight swept across the low ceiling and thick beams. Boxes lay scattered, some sagging with age. He pushed past a pile of broken toys and old newspapers until he spotted a small wooden chest, buried under cobwebs. Inside was a stack of letters, tied with a worn fabric ribbon. He lifted one, the paper thin and yellowing. Elegant handwriting scrolled across the page. Willow Creek, summer of 1964, my dearest Eliza. The letter was intimate, tinged with sadness, a long-distance love, quiet and full of longing. No full name signed, just initials. GB Jack frowned. Eliza. A knock at the front door interrupted his thoughts. He tucked the letter into his pocket and climbed down. Rosie trailed behind as he opened the door. Emilia stood there, jacket zipped halfway, strands of her braid loosened by the wind. "Hope I'm not interrupting," she said softly, her eyes flicking over his face. "Not at all," Jack replied, stepping aside. Rosie lit up. "Miss Emilia, Daddy found something in the attic." Emilia arched a brow. "Oh?" Jack pulled the letter from his pocket and handed it to her. "Old correspondence. There's a whole bundle. Beautiful handwriting. But something about it feels familiar." She took it, eyes scanning the words. When she reached the GB, at the bottom her lips pressed slightly, almost imperceptibly. But Jack caught it. "Do you know who wrote them?" he asked. She placed the letter back on the table. "Not sure. Could be anyone from around here, I suppose." Rosie tugged her hand. "Next time, can you come to the attic with me? I think there's more treasure." Emilia smiled, crouching beside her. "Maybe so, but tonight I think letters are treasure enough." They gathered around the old wooden kitchen table. The light from the lamp above spilled onto the fragile pages. Their conversation drifted. Barn repairs, leaky sinks, spring seed plans. But Jack's thoughts stayed on the name Eliza and those initials, GB. He glanced at Emilia. She was listening to Rosie talk about wildflowers, but her gaze had drifted elsewhere, somewhere farther away, deeper. Later that night, after Emilia had gone and Rosie had fallen asleep, Jack sat alone at the table. Letters spread before him. Each word felt like a whisper from another life. And he knew this wasn't just forgotten paper. This was the beginning of a truth that had waited too long to be heard. The next morning brought an unexpected chill. Wind slipped through the cracks in the old walls, making Jack shiver as he stepped onto the porch. A mug of black coffee warming his hands. The sun hadn't fully risen, but thick clouds already blanketed the sky, casting a dull hush over the land. The barn in the distance didn't look any better in daylight. Its roof sagged lower, the doors barely holding on. The house could wait. Jack knew where the priority lay. Rosie's footsteps padded softly through the house, mingled with the quiet hum of a tune she was singing to herself. The sound, so ordinary, felt like warmth in the misty morning air. Jack exhaled. How long had it been since he'd felt a moment of peace? Even just this, quiet, fleeting. He headed out toward the back fence, tall grass brushing against his jeans, and there she was again. Emilia stood near the boundary line, facing away, her figure still and familiar, as if she belonged here. "You're up early," Jack called. She turned, offering a small smile. "Heard the wind last night. Thought I'd check on the barn." He looked at her more closely. Thin jacket, hair loosely tied. Calm eyes, but something behind them. Something she wasn't saying. "Looks like heavy rain," Jack said. "I was about to tie down some loose panels. Might need more rope." "Then I'll help," she replied without hesitation. "Emilia, the storm's coming, and your barn's about to go with it." Her words made Jack pause, then nod. They ran toward the barn. The wind had picked up, carrying dust and the scent of rain. Emilia held the door while Jack fastened ropes, bracing panels. They worked quickly, instinctively. No wasted movement, no wasted words. By the time the first drops hit the roof, they were soaked through. The wind howled through the cracks, rain mixing with sweat and the smell of old wood. "That should hold," Jack said, his voice nearly lost under distant thunder. They sprinted back to the house, feet slipping in the mud. Rosie was already at the door, worry written all over her face. "Daddy! Miss Emilia!" she cried, handing them both old towels. "We're okay, Bug," Jack assured, drying his face. Emilia crouched beside Rosie, helping towel off the little dog in her arms, her touch gentle and steady. Jack watched, unmoving. A quiet moment, but one that hit something deep. Emilia kneeling on the rug, brushing back Rosie's damp hair. No show, no performance. just care. When Rosie dashed upstairs to change, Jack turned to Emilia. "Why'd you really come back?" he asked quietly. Emilia met his gaze, her eyes clear. "Because you were the first person who didn't look at me like I was my last name." He didn't know what to say, but something in him shifted, not because of what she said, but because of the truth in her eyes. "You said you wanted to learn how to work with your hands," he said, voice low. "I think you just did." She laughed softly but didn't reply. Outside, the rain continued, but inside that old house, something had begun to take root. The rain had eased by midday, but the air remained damp and cold. Jack spent the afternoon hammering the barn door back into place, each strike of the nail echoing like a beat trying to hold something steady inside him. He couldn't shake the image of Emilia kneeling beside Rosie that morning, the gentleness in her touch, the way she moved like she'd always belonged there. Near sundown, as the sky blushed orange behind the trees, the sound of tires on gravel drew Jack's attention. He looked up. A sleek black sedan rolled down the dirt path, too polished, too clean for a place caked in dust and sweat. The door opened and a tall man stepped out, immaculate gray suit, silver hair combed precisely. His gaze swept across the landscape, sharp, cold, before landing on Jack. Jack laid down his hammer, wiping his hands on his jeans. Whoever this man was, he didn't belong here, and the air around him seemed to know it. "Can I help you?" Jack asked evenly. The man stepped forward, voice clipped and precise. "I'm looking for someone, Emilia Blake. I was told she's been staying nearby." Jack's jaw tightened. That name cut clean through the breeze. "I'm her father," the man continued. "Gregory Blake." Jack's heart skipped once. He knew that name, from the news, from whispered conversations in diners. Gregory Blake, the real estate magnate buying up farmland like poker chips. The man behind shuttered barns and sold out homesteads. Jack nodded slowly. "I know the Blakes from town, but I haven't seen Emilia today." Gregory's eyes locked onto his. "She hasn't been answering calls. Thought it was time I came myself." There was something in his tone, less concern, more control. Jack didn't respond. The older man's gaze drifted to the run-down farmhouse behind them, then back to Jack with a faint smirk. "You're the one who bought this place?" he asked. "Yeah. I've heard you're trying to restore it." "An ambitious project," Gregory said, eyes flicking over the decaying boards and unfinished fence. "Though frankly, most of this land would be better used more efficiently." Jack felt his chest tighten. "Some things are worth saving," he said quietly. Gregory offered a thin smile. It didn't reach his eyes. "I prefer efficiency." With that, he turned and walked back to the car, leaving Jack standing in the yard. His heart wasn't pounding from fear, but from something else rising in his chest, like the thunder before another kind of storm. After Gregory Blake's visit, something settled over the farm like a heavy mist, not cold, but dense. The world outside remained the same. The fence unfinished, the barn still leaking, Rosie waking early and running barefoot through muddy grass. But to Jack, something had shifted. Emilia was gone. No more glimpses of her at the fence. No more quiet waves from across the field. No more afternoons fixing gates side by side. Her absence wasn't loud. It was a silence with weight. At first, Jack told himself maybe she was busy, handling something personal. But with each passing day, the emptiness she left behind began to take shape, like the negative space in a painting, like the breath between two lines of a song. And then Rosie asked, "Daddy, where's Miss Emilia?" Jack paused mid-wipe at the kitchen table. He kept his eyes on the cloth. "Maybe she's just got some things to do, sweetheart." Rosie nodded slowly, but that night she barely listened as Jack read her bedtime story. She fidgeted with the red clip in her hair, eyes drifting somewhere far away. The next morning, Jack found her at the kitchen table, surrounded by paper, markers, scissors. For over an hour, she worked in quiet concentration, folding a small paper flower, tying it with a purple ribbon. She tucked it gently into a soft cloth pouch. On a piece of paper written in bright crayon, she scrawled, "Miss Emilia, me and Daddy miss you. Here's a lucky flower because you remind me of someone from my storybooks. If you're sad, this flower will help you smile again. I hope you come back. Love, Rosie." "Daddy, I want to take this to Miss Emilia," she said, eyes shining. Jack nodded. "Of course, Bug." Together they walked the dirt path to the cottage. The sun was setting, painting the sky in streaks of gold and lavender. Neither of them spoke. Each step Jack took felt heavier, like approaching a door he wasn't sure he wanted to knock on. Rosie reached the porch, knelt, and placed the pouch carefully on the wooden step. She stood for a moment, looking at the closed door, hopeful. There was no sound, no reply. But Rosie smiled anyway. "She'll see it," she said softly. They walked home hand in hand. Rosie didn't ask more questions. She didn't need promises, just belief. 2 days passed. Still no sign of Emilia. Jack threw himself into repairs, pipes, planks, leaking beams, but his mind drifted to her laughter, the way she wiped sweat from her brow, the way she listened to Rosie like every word mattered. He didn't know what he was waiting for. A note, a knock, or just a return. On the third morning, Jack opened the door and paused. There, on the porch rail, sat the paper flower, untouched, still perfect, and beneath it a small folded note. "Thank you for the wildflowers. E." Jack held it in his hand, heart still. It wasn't much, but it was everything. A quiet promise, perhaps not to return right away, but to not forget. That night he told Rosie. "She got it?" she gasped. "She did, and she wrote back." Rosie beamed and threw her arms around him. "I told you, that flower has magic." Jack held her close. He didn't correct her, didn't overthink it. Sometimes the smallest gesture could hold the greatest weight, and if someone needed space, you let them have it. Quietly, patiently, like wildflowers blooming on dry ground, soft, unannounced, and full of grace. That afternoon, as Jack was fixing the roof behind the barn, he heard soft footsteps on the dirt path. He looked up. Emilia was walking toward him, her hair down, her face a little tired, but her eyes steady. "Hey," she said quietly. Jack nodded, standing. He didn't need to ask. One look told him she had something she needed to say. "How are you?" he asked. "I need to tell you something." They sat on the porch steps, sunlight drifting through the trees in slow broken patches. Silence settled for a few seconds before Emilia spoke. "The letters. GB wasn't a stranger. He was my grandfather." Jack turned toward her, surprised, but he didn't interrupt. "Before he built his real estate empire, he worked this land. When he was young, he fell in love with a woman named Eliza, but he left her for ambition, for power. Those letters, that's all that's left of what they had." She drew a deep breath. "My family, my father, always taught me that legacy is about what you build on paper, what names are on buildings. But reading those letters, I started wondering if maybe legacy is what you choose to hold on to, and the people you don't let go of." Jack was quiet for a long time. Her words were simple, but they rang in his chest like truth long buried. "So, what your father's doing to this land?" She nodded, eyes fixed on her hands. "He wants it all, this farm included, resorts, golf courses, hotels. I was supposed to help him, but not anymore." Jack looked at her. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" She met his gaze, nothing guarded now. "Because every time I came here, I felt like I was lying to you. And I was scared that if I told you the truth, you wouldn't let me come back." Just then, Rosie burst out of the house, holding a half-wilted grass crown. "Miss Emilia," she shouted, running up. "I saved this for you. You forgot it the other day. Emilia bent down, taking the little crown, resting a hand gently on Rosie's shoulder. Thank you, Rosie. Don't go away again, okay? Rosie said, her voice small but so full of sincerity it nearly broke something open in both adults. Jack watched them, something in his chest cracking. Not from anger, but from all the years he'd spent bracing himself, expecting to be left. But seeing Rosie touch Emilia like family, something shifted. You should have told me the truth, Jack said, but his voice was no longer cold. I know, Emilia whispered. Later, when Rosie had skipped back inside, Jack sat beside Emilia, hands resting on his knees, eyes on the horizon. So what now? He asked. She turned to him, eyes brave but still hurting. I don't want my father to take this place, and I sure as hell don't want to be the reason you lose it. Jack didn't answer right away, but this time, instead of shutting down, he let the silence speak, because now it didn't feel like distance. It felt like trust, slowly taking shape. The meeting day arrived faster than Jack expected. That morning, all of Oak Ridge seemed to stir. Farmers, mechanics, small store owners, all left their homes early, some with folders under their arms, some dressed just a bit more formal than usual. Not because they trusted Gregory Blake, but because they knew today was about something bigger than themselves. Jack arrived at the town hall with Emilia. She walked beside him, not touching, not speaking, but her presence steadied him more than words could. The hall was full. The smell of old paper, dust, and hushed murmurs filled the space. At the front, Gregory stood in his impeccable suit beside a long table draped in white cloth, lined with thick stacks of contracts. He began in a calm, commanding voice, I'm not here to take anything from you. I'm here with an offer, above market value, for land that no longer yields. A new direction, for the future. Some nodded, others frowned. Jack could see it, the weariness in them, the quiet temptation to finally let go. Gregory's gaze swept the room and landed on Jack, then shifted to Emilia. Silence stretched. Emilia stepped forward. My father is right about one thing. The future doesn't wait. But if that future comes at the cost of erasing memory, people, and the roots of this town, then that's not progress. That's removal. Her voice wasn't loud, but it carried. Each word landed like a quiet truth. I grew up around numbers, deals, contracts, but none of that ever made me feel like I belonged. Until I stood on a broken-down porch on a farm no one believed in. She paused, eyes sweeping the crowd. This place, it's not perfect, but it's real. And if we sell away every home, every piece of land, what's left? An empty map or an empty legacy? Silence. Jack stepped up. No notes, no script, just calloused hands and a steady voice. I put every last dollar I had into this farm, not because I thought it'd make me rich, but because I wanted something real for my daughter. He looked to the front row where Rosie sat next to Mabel, the town's eldest resident. He smiled softly. She deserves to grow up in a place that's imperfect but honest, where people fix what's broken instead of tearing it down. He turned back to the crowd. You've all done that, year after year. You rebuild after storms. You share seeds. You lift each other up. Don't let a signature undo what your hands have built. On a moment of stillness. Then from the back, I'm not selling. Another voice rose, firmer. We built this with our bare hands. A third added, let him pave over someone else's past. One by one, the room transformed, not loud but unwavering, like roots pushing up through stone. Gregory stood still, his expression unchanged, but his confidence visibly cracked. Emilia met his eyes, not with defiance, but with quiet conviction. When the meeting ended, people stepped into the sun with something lighter in their steps. They shook Jack's hand, clapped Emilia on the back. Rosie came running out. Daddy, Miss Emilia, did we win? Jack looked at Emilia, Their eyes met. We didn't just keep the land, he said quietly. We kept ourselves. Spring arrived in Oak Ridge not with fanfare, but gently, like everything was relearning how to begin again. At Jack's small farm, the soil had been turned row by row, weeds cleared, fences rebuilt, and the barn now stood stronger than ever. Every crack patched, every broken piece repaired. Not perfect, but ready for another season. Jack stood at the edge of the field, boots sunk into the soft earth, eyes on the wildflower patch Rosie had planted. Tiny green shoots pushed through, whispers from the soil. Everything will be okay. Rosie ran up, clutching a box of seeds. Daddy, Miss Emilia says today's the perfect day to plant flowers. Jack smiled. Where is she? In the barn, checking the roof. These days, Emilia didn't announce her visits. She came because she was part of it now, not out of obligation, but choice. Jack walked toward the barn. Emilia was up on a ladder, inspecting the new roofing. She looked down and smiled, that soft, easy smile that no longer held anything back. All good? He asked. Should hold through the next storm, she replied, wiping her hands on her pants. Rosie's waiting to plant. That girl keeps me busier than her dad ever did. Emilia chuckled, climbing down. The three of them knelt in the dirt. Rosie dropped seeds one by one. Jack covered them gently, and Emilia watered each row. No one directed, no one led, just a family, building something with their hands and hearts. As the sun dipped low, Rosie darted after a butterfly. Jack and Emilia stayed by the garden bed, quiet for a long moment. You once asked what I wanted from this place, Jack said slowly. Now I think it wasn't just about saving the land. I wanted someone to save it with. Emilia didn't answer right away, but when she turned to him, her gaze no longer held fear. And I wanted a place that didn't have to be perfect, just real enough, that I didn't have to run. Jack reached out, brushing a strand of hair from her cheek. It was soft, simple, and this time, neither of them pulled away. In the distance, the rows of wildflowers danced with the breeze, and in that moment, no promises, no big declarations. They both knew. They were home. Summer arrived, bringing soft sunlight and the hum of cicadas in the trees. On the small farm at the edge of town, Rosie's spring wildflowers had bloomed, bursts of yellow, purple, and white spilling across the fence line like a woven tapestry. Jack stood at the edge of the garden, eyes tracing the neat rows of growing vegetables. No longer dry or lifeless, the land seemed to breathe again, and maybe so did he. Behind him, laughter echoed from the barnyard. Neighbors gathered, kids running wild, someone playing music on an old speaker. A small celebration for the first harvest, but for Jack, it felt like a victory long in the making. He looked around. Rosie was spinning in a sundress, hair flying in the sun. Nearby, Emilia leaned against the barn door, her hair catching the golden light, her gaze calm, settled. As Jack stepped beside her, she turned and smiled. What do you think? She asked, gesturing toward the crowd. Feels like something I didn't think I'd ever have, Jack replied softly. A family? She asked. A family and a home. They stood together, hands not touching, but breath in sync. From the grass, Rosie called out, Daddy, Miss Emilia, it's time for lanterns. They both laughed, then followed her. In Rosie's hands was a small paper lantern, glowing softly from within. As it lifted into the sky, joining dozens of others, Jack looked up, something inside him light as air. Not because everything was perfect, but because, for once, he wasn't carrying it all alone. Beside him, Emilia whispered, We didn't just save a farm. Jack nodded, eyes on the drifting light. We saved ourselves. Autumn in Oak Ridge brought with it the sweetness of ripening fruit and the faint scent of dry grass drifting through the breeze. The farm had settled. Wildflowers still bloomed late in the season. Life no longer rushed or rumbled. It breathed, steady and warm. One golden afternoon, Emilia asked Jack and Rosie to join her up on the hill behind the farm, the highest spot where you could see all the land stretch out like a honey-colored quilt. "Picnic time," she declared, her eyes sparkling with mischief. Jack laughed, carrying a basket of sandwiches and strawberry jam, while Rosie skipped ahead with a checkered red cloth. They sat under an old oak, watching the sun sink slowly behind the fields. The wind grew cooler. Emilia stood, walked over to Jack, her eyes lit with something different. "You once asked what I was looking for here," she began, voice low but certain. Jack looked up, nodded. "I didn't know then, but now I do." She knelt, pulling a small box from her jacket pocket. Inside was a simple earthy ring with a moss-green stone, the color of land, of spring. Jack's eyes widened. "Jack Callahan," she said, her voice low but steady. "Will you marry me? Not because we figured everything out, but because I'd rather walk through every storm with you than chase sunshine alone." Rosie gasped, "Say yes, Daddy." Jack laughed, feeling both foolish and absolutely right. He didn't answer with words. He pulled Emilia up and into his arms under the glowing sky. "I think I've been waiting for this," he whispered. "Just didn't expect you'd be the one asking." They married in late fall, in the backyard of the house they rebuilt. String lights above, wildflowers everywhere. Mabel officiated. Rosie carried the bouquet. Everyone in town came, some with pies, some with songs, all with smiles. There was no fancy dress, no grand aisle, just love and hands holding on. Rosie danced between grown-ups, cupcake in hand. When Jack and Emilia swayed to their first slow dance, Rosie yelled, "Go slow so I can join." After the wedding, life didn't change much. Still dirt, fences, seeds to plant. But now everything felt lighter. Mornings meant coffee from Jack, bread from Emilia. Rosie ran around feeding chickens, watering flowers. Normal things now tasted like home. One night, as they sat on the porch, moonlight pooling across the roof, Emilia leaned into Jack and whispered, "Jack, I have news." He turned, eyes wide. "A baby," she said, placing his hand over her belly. "We're adding to this little team." Jack said nothing, just brought her hand to his lips, kissed it gently. Rosie sat nearby, watching. "What is it, Daddy?" "A baby," Emilia said. "You're going to be a big sister." Rosie froze, then burst out, "For real? A real little baby?" From that day, Rosie became part-time gardener, full-time baby planner. She folded clothes, made wall drawings, even named the baby. "If it's a boy, Max. If it's a girl, Lila." Seasons passed in quiet joy. The farm grew. So did the family. The day Lila was born, the world felt paused. Rain tapped gently on the roof like a heartbeat. Rosie stayed by Emilia's side the whole time, holding her hand tighter with each passing minute. Jack paced nearby, his face both terrified and tender, humming lullabies as if to calm the storm inside him. And when that first cry pierced the quiet, they all exhaled together, a family, not perfect, but whole, and full of love in every breath. That winter, Jack wrote in his journal, just one line, "This land saved me, but they, Emilia, Rosie, and Lila, they are my home." Summer arrived early at the Callahan farm. Rosie woke up just as the sun peeked over the hills, golden light spilling through the window like a soft blanket over the wooden floor. She blinked a few times, then jumped out of bed, her hair tangled, eyes still sleepy. In the next room, the babbling sound of Layla rang out, "Ba ba ba," followed by the little patter of feet across the wooden floor. Rosie smiled, rushed to wash her face, then ran over to scoop up her baby sister. Lila had learned to walk, unsteady and clumsy, but to Rosie, once the self-proclaimed only child, Having a tiny fan who followed her every move was something thrilling and heartwarming all at once. "I've got a special plan for you this summer, Lila," Rosie whispered, planting a big kiss on her sister's cheek. The idea came to her one afternoon while reading a book under the old oak behind the house. Lila's first birthday was just around the corner. Mom was planning to bake a mango cake. Dad was setting up tables in the yard. But Rosie wanted to do something truly special, something only she could create, not store-bought, not something helped by grown-ups, a birthday gift grown with her own hands. She remembered planting flowers with Dad and Emilia, dirt sticking to her fingers, seeds tiny like specks of dust, and waiting a long time before the first green sprout appeared. "Lila's like a flower," she murmured, drawing a small circle in the dirt. "She needs care, love, and a beautiful garden." The plan began. She brought out a small notebook, a pencil, and a box of old crayons. On the first page, Rosie wrote her summer mission. 1. Find a sunny spot. 2. Ask Mrs. Mabel for seeds. 3. Don't let Dad find out. If he knows, he'll help, and then it won't be a real surprise. 4. Finish before Lila's birthday. Only 5 weeks to go. She chose a patch of earth behind the chicken coop where the sunlight fell soft as butter and few people ever went. Every afternoon after chores, Rosie snuck out, digging with an old toy shovel, pulling weeds, watering carefully. Each seed she planted felt like bearing a secret treasure. Some days were bright, wind whispering through the leaves. Other days, heavy rain pelted the ground, flooding her little plot, drowning young sprouts. Rosie sat in the mud, soaked, her shoes dirty and her eyes downcast. That evening, she barely touched her dinner, said nothing, just sat quietly beside Lila's crib. Her baby sister reached up, tiny fingers brushing Rosie's cheek. Small, warm, and just like that, hope returned. The next morning, the skies cleared. Rosie returned to her secret garden and gasped. Tiny green shoots were pushing up through the wet soil, trembling in the breeze. She smiled, tears welling, not because the flowers had bloomed, but because they were still alive, despite the storms. "Still a chance," she wrote in her notebook. "Must try harder." In the weeks that followed, Rosie cared for her garden like it was a living story. She propped up leaves with sticks, covered the bed with cardboard during harsh sun, picked out bugs, and even made compost from vegetable peels Mom threw away. She told no one, except Lila. Every night, Rosie sat by the crib, whispering stories about her secret garden, about a flower called Perseverance, a purple one named Hope, and a late bloomer she called Starting Over. Lila didn't understand, but laughed and clapped anyway, and that was enough. Then the day arrived. Lila's birthday. The whole farm shimmered with ribbons. The scent of mango cake filled the air, and laughter echoed across the yard. Rosie wore a white dress in a red butterfly clip, but instead of standing by the cake, she took Lila's hand and led her down the hidden path behind the coop. "Keep your eyes open," she said. "I want you to see every step." When they reached the spot, golden light spilled over a garden now in full bloom. Pink, purple, yellow, wild and untamed, but full of life. A butterfly floated down, landing softly on a purple petal. Lila laughed, pointed up and squealed, "Ba ba ba." Rosie knelt beside her, placing her sister's hand between hers. "Happy birthday, Lila. I grew this whole garden for you because I love you so much." That night, when everyone was asleep, Emilia sat quietly by the window and wrote in her journal, "Rosie didn't just grow up in age. She learned to love, to nurture, to fail, and to try again. And the most beautiful part, she didn't keep anything for herself. She chose to plant it for someone else.